Really, I'm glad to have an opportunity to speak on this issue. Now, when the controversy arose in Ulster, I happened to be on the other side of the Atlantic, and I was actually on a small tour that brought me to many places where we met the sons, grandsons, great-grandsons of people who had emigrated to America and who have done well since in their communities, but weren't always welcome. Now, I think we have to start at the beginning of this debate and see what we do agree on. I take it that everybody agrees that we should honour our international obligations, and also that we should honour the laws as we've adopted, which include the European laws in relation to this matter. And once you'd agree to go down the way of law, you have to stick to the law. And therefore, everybody who claims asylum has right to due process. And it is not fair or right to prejudge anybody's individual case. And there are a lot of processes involved: asylum, subsidiary protection, humanitarian leave to remain. You've got the International Tribunal and so on. You also have the possibility of somebody who's dissatisfied with all of the decisions made all the way down of going for judicial review to the courts. Now, I welcome some steps that have been taken to speed up this process, and the present Minister's predecessor joined it into one process. But on the other hand, we also have to recognise too that the asylum seeker, or the person who comes here looking to stay here, has the right to use all of the process, including the courts, and no matter how much you telescope that, that can take some time. Now, I do think it's important, Minister, that in all the levels of the process that we provide adequate resources, and that includes in the courts. So we need to be able to make sure that there are no delays on the state side, including in the courts, that are created by the state. And that, in that way, we give everybody as speedy decisions as possible. Now, the other thing that I think has characterised this debate is that I think it would be fair to say that a lot of people in communities say, look, direct provision isn't the solution. People who would be involved in the anti-racism networks and so on say direct provision isn't the right answer. But I think we have to take that not in the way the world should be, but in the way it is. Now, I have to say, on a Monday in my office, two very, very large groups keep coming into me. No conflict between them. One are local people, indigenous people who have been there forever on the housing list, who can't get houses and wind up in hotels and B&Bs. And the other are asylum seekers looking for status in this country. And we all get on famously well. But the actual reality is that we're now trying to deal with this crisis in the context where there aren't enough houses for, no matter how you rejig this, it's hard to see how we're going to accommodate the number of people looking for housing. And the issue of displacement and who gets displaced is one that I think we have to confront. And that is one that I don't have a Solomon answer to, but I come to again. I do have to say that every week, the hardest part of my week is listening to people on all of the housing issues. You also have a large number of people in direct provision who actually have legal leave to remain. And that raises two issues that I'd just like to touch on here tonight. The first one is, why aren't we able to house those? And another issue that has come in my office, and I'm going to pursue the full way, is I've had at least two people come into my office with stamp 4 permission to remain. They've gone down to the local authority in Galway City and they have been refused, under some housing circular, permission to go on the housing list, to even go on the housing list for HAP. Now, I've read the circular. It's not the best. Well, maybe it's good, well written in terms of being totally ambiguous, but my reading of it is that these people are, under Clause B, entitled to be on the housing list. And we're now taking this case to the Ombudsman, and we will take it further if we necessarily need to do so. But, Minister, we need to clarify, the minute you get a stamp 4 visa, are you entitled to go on the housing list of a local authority? And can you get the Minister, maybe after this debate, to come back to me and say yes or no, are you entitled for the stamp 4 visa to go on the housing list? Or, as Galway City Council are telling me, do you have to wait 4 years to go on the housing list? I have to say, Minister, we've set up wondrous systems in this country that often create terrible problems. And I say wondrous not in a complimentary way. Because we've got this system of bidding that's going on there. And I know that they'll say that for commercially sensitive reasons you can't tell anybody what everybody knows, that you've got to tender in for a Hotel A or Guest House B to take asylum seekers. And obviously the information is quite obviously got around the town way ahead of you making an announcement, that even when everybody in the town knows, you officially don't know yet. Now, that system's broken. We have to think of another system that doesn't upset procurement laws, but deals with this issue. The other thing we haven't done well is communications and community consultation. Community services in health, education, transport, which could actually be a boon to the greater community if they were handled rightly. For example, there are plenty of places in my constituency that there's no transport for the locals, not to mind for asylum seekers, to the largest towns or cities. Now, Minister, I read your senior colleague's speech carefully. And I noticed that a consultative group has been set up to be chaired by Catherine Day. Now, one of the things I worry about are consultative groups made of those who are, in day-to-day life, quite insulated from the problem, who don't live in the areas where this is likely to be a matter of contention, who aren't competing on the ground for very, very scarce resources, that exacerbates this problem. Now, when I came home from the United States of America, and just before the problem in Uachtarard was resolved, I did put a proposal that a forum would be set up with 4 months to come up with an agreed report that would look at alternatives to direct provision. And it would also focus on community relations and better prior consultation. I suggested that that forum would have representatives on it, with a chair appointed by yourself, who will accept the present chair, that there would be representatives from the department and from INISH and from the Reception and Integration Agency, that you'd have representatives from the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, from the Immigrant Council of Ireland, from the anti-racism networks, representatives of the CEOs of the various counties, because housing is a big issue involved here in public housing, representative local authority members to be selected by local authority members groups, representatives from the community sector to be selected from those registered with the various local authorities from around the country. And that this group would be set up, not a huge group, would be set up, they'd look for oral submissions, look for written submissions, and then where they saw appropriate would bring people in a concentrated effort to make oral submissions. And that basically the people from the NGO side of it, the local authority side and from the state side would be around the table rather than it just being the state side. And that they would then be tasked with facing up to the realities and making recommendations in the actual realities of the world. Not in some ideal world when it wouldn't be the way it is, which unfortunately it is. And that they be given 4 months. Now, at that stage, I was suggesting the end of January because, of course, this was 2 months ago. As you know, I made this proposal available to yourself. I also made it available to my party leader. Now, setting up a group that doesn't represent all the diverse approaches to this that are out there from responsible groups, in my view, will not get the buy-in that we need so that we get a national conversation and a national buy-in to a solution. Something that's led and controlled by officialdom will not get that buy-in. And that is the proposal I'd like to put back on the table here tonight, because, Minister, we can give out all we want in this chamber about the way the world is, but the problem is to come up with workable proposals that might actually get buy-in from the vast majority of the well-meaning people of this country.